This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by iZotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, Stealth Chairs, and SAE Institute Nashville. You're hearing my voice right now mixed through iZotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on Atom Audio monitors and headphones, all while sitting in a comfortable Stealth chair. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes below, and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave us a comment. It's a great way for you to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
Remastered all the Grateful Dead studio albums, and it was a fairly quick job in 2013 for HD Tracks. Rhino and HD Tracks wanted to get these records up there. Remastered all 13 of the studio albums. Used Plangent. You have to work from the original tape, so I was working from the original master tapes. I put Working Man's Dead up on the tape machine. I press play, and Uncle John's Band comes out of the speakers, and I cried. It was
Awesome.
Just so emotional for me.
It's such a great record, and it really sounds so beautiful listening to your remaster of it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lij Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, the podcast that brings you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Dave Glasser, founder and chief engineer at Airshow Mastering. Dave has over 35 years' experience in audio engineering and has mastered thousands of records, including more than 80 Grammy nominees. He's a 3-time nominee himself, earning 2 Grammys for mastering and restoration work on the anthology of American folk music and Screamin' and Hollerin' the Blues, The Worlds of Charlie Patton. Dave's career began with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, followed by 8 years of recording and production for NPR. He founded Airshow in 18. Wow, that's going way back.
Yeah.
He founded Airshow in 1983 and transitioned to full-time mastering in 1990.
Yep.
In 1997, he expanded to Boulder, Colorado, and later built a new state-of-the-art facility in 2016, where he continues to lead a busy mastering practice today. Special thanks to Matt Boudreau for making our introduction. Thanks, Matt, my brother from another podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
And this episode is dedicated to the memory of Phil Lesh. So please welcome David Glasser to Recording Studio Rockstars. Dave, are you ready to rock, dude?
I'm here. I'm ready. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, man. It's an honor. It was fun to meet you. I guess we met at
NAMM.
AES or NAMM or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then didn't I see you at an AES event also?
Yeah, we met this year at NAMM, and then we saw each other at AES just last month. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so is that always been part of your MOs to try and make it to all the conferences and stuff like that, both East Coast and West Coast?
You know, I'm pretty new to NAMM. I've only been several times, but God, I've been going to AES shows since 75.
Wow.
Yeah. And
because as said in your bio, you're an East Coaster first, right?
Used to be an East Coaster. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool, dude. Welcome to the show, man. I gave a little bit of an introduction in the bio there, but maybe if you don't mind, give us a little bit of a story arc of your journey from getting interested in this stuff to having a beautiful studio, Airshow Mastering now in Boulder?
Well, gosh, like most folks in our business, my curiosity was piqued just by reading liner notes, listening to music, going to record stores, just poring over liner notes, and seeing the names of producers kept on coming up, and engineers, and the famous studios, and I was just really intrigued by all that. Before I, in high school, I tried to get a job at a radio station, was unsuccessful. In college, the first thing I did was to join the college radio station, and I guess that was the start.
Where were you in college?
Brandeis University in Massachusetts.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Just the confluence of technology and music, art, is I'm just fascinated by that, and I still am.
Yeah. So I'm from Massachusetts too, and I feel like I got a nice introduction to music and all of that back then. Although I was clueless about records, I wasn't reading the liner notes or anything. So kudos to you for paying attention. What
they don't have liner notes anymore. So
right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I know it's frustrating. I mean, especially as a mastering engineer, do you feel like there's hope for your credits accompanying the records that you master and remaster these days?
It depends. If it's a digital only release, smaller artists, smaller labels, then it's a crapshoot whether credits will ever appear anywhere. If it's a bigger artist from a real label, then it usually happens.
Yeah. When we're streaming, do we even see credits? Is that too granular of a question to ask you?
Tidal has credits. Tidal is the streaming service that I always go to. I don't really use any of the others, so I really don't know.
Give it a bit of a shout out. So let's assume for a minute somebody's listening to this and they're not using Tidal yet, but they're sort of curious. Maybe they're just hearing it wherever they've been listening to stuff. What might they experience if they went over and started listening to music on Tidal?
Well, first and foremost, Tidal pays the artists much more than Spotify, a little bit more than Apple, and they were always about higher audio quality. They've kind of backtracked on that somewhat. They were streaming MQA audio. They're not anymore, unfortunately, but they are streaming high-res FLAC, and it sounds really good. I could usually find 95% of the things that I'm looking for on Tidal. So I much prefer that over Spotify and Apple and Amazon and those other ones.
Any idea if somebody who's listening to music is more likely to find like older records in quantity on Tidal or newer records in quantity on Tidal or anything like that?
Yes.
In other words, if people are interested in remasters and a longer history of records, are they going to find 95% there of that kind of music, or are they also going to find the latest, hip hop and whatever?
Yeah, pretty much. I have a pretty eclectic taste, and I could find almost everything that I'm looking for. Going back to the 60s and 50s, and all the way up to the latest things.
Okay, cool. And so Tidal pays all the artists really well, and then that's a place where you can actually see credits. So Rockstars, if you're curious about like who's actually making the records you're listening to, that might
Yeah.
be a good choice.
Mhm.
All right, groovy. I don't even remember how we just pivoted off to that. I guess it was just talking about history of making records.
Credits.
Because you were
Credits,
looking
that's
at the
where-
liner notes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right. So you were in Massachusetts getting started.
Yeah.
And if you want to pick up from there.
Well, I continued working for the college radio station throughout my illustrious, my dubious college career. And when I graduated, I took a job at a radio station that was right down the street from the campus. It was a classical radio station. And my job was running tape duplicators, duplicating concerts of the Boston Symphony Orchestra and the Boston Pops Orchestra. And this was pre-internet. So syndication was you would dub a tape and mail the tape out to the station. They would play the tape and then mail it back. And did that week after week. Boston Symphony, Boston Pops. We also handled the duplication for the New York Philharmonic and the Chicago Symphony. Kind of monkey work, just running tape duplicators, but it was a great opportunity to learn about analog tape machines and all the ins and outs. Eventually, I was able to help out and then actually record the Boston Pops shows at Boston Symphony Hall. And that,
Wow.
If you've never been to Boston Symphony Hall, put that on your bucket list. It's one of the greatest concert halls in the world.
I grew up, and that, of course, is my first introduction to going to see the symphony.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know what I was I didn't know what I was,
Right.
what a special experience I was having. How do you describe that? When you drop a comment like that, what does that mean? Is it sort of the sonics of it and the way it translates compared to some of the other halls out there? Is it just the history of it? I remember Beethoven is emblazoned across the top of the stage.
That's right, yeah. Well, it was the first concert hall designed by an acoustician, by Wallace Sabine. And I think it was the first concert hall that he ever designed. And boy, he really nailed it. If you go to different concert halls, and I've been to a bunch of them, you always keep coming back to the fact that that Boston Symphony Hall just sounds so fantastic. The sound is enveloping. It's all so real. Buddy and I, in college, he bought a pair of tickets to Symphony Hall. The concert was Leonard Bernstein conducting the New York Philharmonic, doing Beethoven's Ninth. And our seats were at the very, very last row in the orchestra, underneath the balcony. And even back there, the basses would just hit you in the chest, and that was one of those life-changing concert experiences.
Yeah, so that probably gave you a real appreciation for what you thought the music should sound like when it translates out of a pair of speakers, too, right?
And I think anybody working in our biz, even if you don't like classical music, go and see symphony concerts and chamber music concerts, and hear for yourself how it sounds. How it sounds live. And that should be the benchmark of everything that we do, I think.
Do you feel like things like dynamic carried through for you too? Just like what's the, when you learn how to make a pop record, you begin to learn about tools like compression, and you spend a lot of time controlling the dynamics of sounds. But maybe when you appreciate what a symphony can do, you begin to sort of reverse that, where you're trying to maintain the dynamic range of a performance in the final recording and mastering. Is that true, or is that a thing, or are you almost always limiting that further for the recorded medium?
No, I think it's definitely true. I mean, our goal shouldn't be just to reduce the dynamic range so that it's convenient to listen to, but to sculpt it so that the dynamics and the emotions of the music are well served. And it's not just symphonies. I remember going to see the Grateful Dead with their Wall of Sound, and that'd be 1974. And there were times when the band was so quiet that you had to strain to listen to what was coming off of the stage, and then it would build and build and build like a symphony until it was, just shatteringly, gloriously loud. And that's the magic,
Yeah, I have been to about 5 Dead shows in my time, and I remember really enjoying this sort of crescendo of the music.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I just on hindsight, I just realized somehow I don't know that I even mentioned the Grateful Dead connection in the intro. So Rockstars, that's a huge one. Is that Dave is also responsible for remastering and mastering. I guess you can explain to us which ones might be first-time masters versus remasters, but almost all of the Grateful Dead records, right?
There are 2 of us. A guy named Jeffrey Norman in California has been working for the Grateful Dead since, I think, 1980. And he hired me in 2004, so 20 years ago, to work on the remaster of the Grateful Dead movie for DVD.
Oh, yeah. Now, would that be the same Grateful Dead? Oh, the original film, not like the multi-series Netflix documentary.
No. This was the movie that they shot in 74, came out in 77.
Yeah.
And I've been working with them ever since. Slowly at first, they would call me the following year and say, "Hey, we have another video." A year and a half later, "Hey, we have something else." And now it's a lot.
That's great.
Jeffrey works primarily on the live shows that they put out. And
there must be just a ton of live recordings to just keep re-releasing.
Oh yeah. They played something like 2,300 concerts in their career.
Wow.
I think 18 or 1,900 are in the vault. They've only officially released, 400, 300, 400. So there's many more years of music to come.
Native Instruments supercharges your music production with Complete 15 featuring Contact 8 new machine hardware integration and cutting-edge synths, samples, and effects. Contact 8 now gives you the chords and phrases tool for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument for blending organic and synth textures. Plus, Machine 3.0 is here, giving you seamless control over Native Instruments gear and the latest NKS-supported hardware. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Can you talk a little bit about what a Grateful Dead show was like in that respect for the rock stars listening who, are younger than that or whatever, didn't get a chance to do it? So, for example, the Grateful Dead, in my understanding, was one of the first bands that ever not only allowed but welcomed and invited people to come in and tape the shows themselves and would have a tapers section, for example.
Yeah, and I think they came to that reluctantly, more from a position of not wanting to hassle people who were bringing their recorders in. And that turned out to be a brilliant move. It certainly didn't hurt their popularity and their sales, and it's now part of their legacy.
Such a cool thing. So with this long history of recording all the live performances, I guess there's just an endless, well, not endless, but 2,300 is a pretty long list to get through. Okay, so sorry to derail you there for a sec. Talk a little bit about some of the, if you want, maybe bring us forward to some of your favorite Grateful Dead records you've done, and then what are recent for you.
Let's see. Well, it was a thrill working on that first one, the Grateful Dead movie. So I remember seeing that in the theaters, a theater, in 77 when it came out. And what they did, and this is kind of indicative about how the band and their organization approached the music and approached the music business. They rented small movie theaters, and brought in a rock and roll PA system, quad system, and showed the movie with a real rock and roll PA.
That's great.
This was long before movie theaters had decent sound. So that was very cool working on that. That was a long.
And then all the movie sound would just go playback through the PA.
Yeah.
The speaking parts as well as all the music.
Yes. That was like a 2-week mastering project, which quite long. And it was a great introduction to that whole, all the mechanizations of that scene. What was the rest of the question?
I don't know. I just love hearing stories of the Grateful Dead. I mean, I got a ton of questions queued up, but I tend to leap us around a little bit. So let's go back for a sec and just talk about getting from Massachusetts out to Colorado and starting Airshow Mastering. If you want to talk about it.
Sure.
The arc of that story.
Well, there was a stop in between. I moved from Massachusetts to Washington, D.C., and worked for 8 years at National Public Radio.
Oh, yeah, right on.
Yeah. And did a whole variety of stuff. All the news shows, All Things Considered and Morning Edition. And
that was through the 80s?
That was, yes. Mm-hmm.
So when I was driving to school with my stepdad, listening in his Datsun pickup truck to All Things Considered on the way home every day, I was probably hearing your work.
If you heard a mistake, then that was probably me. Yeah. A miscued tape.
Okay, here's a question related to that. I always thought they were an example of one of the first shows to take a theme song and say, we're going to have everybody else recreate this theme song and switch it up from episode to episode or show to show. Was that... does that ring a bell to you?
I remember they had different arrangements of the theme. So they would switch that up.
Not sure who was recording it.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Yeah. I know Jim Anderson recorded the original themes.
It was a cool effect, I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So NPR. So what sort of stuff do you feel like you learned from? I mean, you talked about. I mean, there'd be more to talk about probably from the symphony too, like recording methods and stuff like that. But what also do you think you might have picked up working in radio at NPR that sort of carries over to Airshow Mastering and the way that you do things today?
Boy, I learned so much. Working at NPR. There was a staff of maybe 30 or so engineers. It was a relatively new network, so most of the engineers were relatively young guys like me. And we were all learning together. It was a great hang.
And you're in DC, right?
Yeah. I learned pretty much everything that I know about orchestral recording, about live recording. I recorded a lot of live jazz concerts, and post-production work. Pretty basic post-production work, because NPR, even though it was a great radio thing to listen to, they didn't have multi-track facilities. If we wanted to do a multi-layered, sophisticated documentary thing, we'd have like 6 or so 2-track tape machines in the studio, and you would mark the tape with grease pencil. So you would start one machine and fade it in, and then when the grease pencil mark came along, you would start another machine and crossfade them and work until you had to stop, and then pick it up and cut them together. So that was kind of interesting, a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember learning, one of my internships was in a audio post-production house in St. Louis, and I learned all these unexpected tricks or hacks. Like the one that stands out is he had this console designed so that every time he used the talkback, it would put a low 100 hertz tone under his voice or a subtone or something, which meant that which it didn't bother you. You wouldn't really hear it, but it was like hidden in there, such that when you would zip the 2-track tape and rewind or fast forward to move around the tape,
you would hear it.
When that hit, it would sound like a 1K beep, and then you'd know that was, that's where I stop on the tape. A lot of like little mechanical tricks like that to try and navigate through the recordings.
Yeah. Did you back time tape machines?
I don't know about that. I didn't get into the advanced stage. I was just interning, so I was mostly sitting on a chair watching him work, Yeah,
well, that's how we timed things out. You would thread the tape backwards around the capstan and push play, and then time it with a stopwatch. And
to keep track of how long a recording was?
To plan your cues and how they would lie in a program.
Right. So you'd have to hit play before the music started, and you'd want to time it correctly. Is that sort of the idea?
So you would know that when you hit play on a machine, after the interview that was already playing ended, the music on that tape would come up at the right spot.
Right.
So
that reminds me,
instead of sliding tracks in Pro Tools, you would do that mechanically with tape machines.
But in real time too. So like you get it right the first time.
Yep.
So that reminds me of my time as a film projectionist, because that was my first job, was running carbon arc film projectors in a movie theater. And in order we'd have to switch from one projector to the other, because the reels would hold about an hour worth of film on them, and you'd actually assemble them out of smaller 20-minute reels. And then
so you had to watch for the pop.
Yeah, well, we'd do something that it was called a changeover, and so there would be a little circle in the top left-hand corner of the film, and when you'd see that pop up onto the screen, that was your cue to start up the other machine. And then that would give that a moment, enough time for the other machine to wind up to speed. And then when you saw the second circle pop up, that was your cue to hit the switch and do the changeover. And it would switch the electronics for the audio, so that the audio would switch from one machine to the new machine. And it would switch the electronics for a mechanical shutter that would block off the machine that was playing, so it stopped shining light on the screen, and open up the shutter on the new machine so that it would spill light onto the screen, and then you'd have a seamless changeover from one reel to the other. So as a projectionist, I would get to know intimately this one section of film where this happened. I know every line and every quote and all the changes and you know, what they did with the camera shots and everything. It's funny. I think that is true of audio too. I think we may not always be aware of it, but we probably get really intimately familiar with certain parts of records and songs and things just because we worked on them so much. Okay, so you were doing the NPR stuff, and then, you know, what was the sort of switch into getting into mastering and starting your own studio?
You know, it was kind of accidental. In addition to working at NPR, I was also doing freelance recording, mostly live recording, and I had a fly pack, you know, a bunch of flight cases of stuff, a nice Calrec console, and my recording system was a Sony F1 system.
Oh, right. Is that the video format?
Yeah. It was a digital processor that hooked up to a consumer VCR, and processor would encode 16-bit digital audio onto the video signal and record that as a video signal. It was really convenient. It was lightweight. It was so much lighter and smaller than having to lug two analog tape machines.
What kind of tape machines would it have substituted? Like if you had taken analog tape, what would those machines have been?
At NPR, we used Studer P67s, were our portable machines.
Are these things that sort of fold up to look like a suitcase when you got them closed up, or does it look like the big thing with wheels on it?
No, they were standalone, and they would fit in a flight case. Yeah. I had a couple Otari 5050s that were smaller than the Studers, but still heavy, still big. So two tape machines and a rack of noise reduction, was a heavy thing to carry around. So the Sony F1 system was so much more convenient, and I think we all fooled ourselves into thinking that it actually sounded good, because they didn't sound all that great.
Was it really the precursor to the ADAT?
In a way, yeah. It was kind of a baby brother to the Sony 1630, which was a larger, more professional system that used a U-matic tape machine to store the audio, and that was the standard for CD masters for a long, long time. Still have one that I fire up every year or so. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yes. I sort of mentally jumped to the ADAT thinking about the VCR, but this is actually also, probably this was more of the precursor to the DAT tape or something, wasn't it?
Well, I think that they're all interrelated. The technologies overlap. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then, so you were going out to record with all that stuff, and that's what got you into the recording and the editing and the delivery of that is a form almost of mastering too, right?
Well, the thing with with those F1 tapes, they were consumer beta tapes, so you really couldn't edit them. You couldn't do much besides play them back. So I, along with a bunch of other people back then, I bought the very, very first Digidesign Sound Tools system. I don't know if you remember that. That was the precursor to Pro Tools, and it was a 2-track editor. So then I could actually do something with these tapes, and that kind of led naturally to producing masters for albums. So
right on.
It's kind of an accidental accidental thing, accidental slide into mastering.
And then when did you begin Airshow and kind of get things rolling there? And then I guess you just did a big remodel in 2016.
Yeah. Boy, you're really jumping ahead.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. I founded Airshow before I started doing mastering stuff. I was doing just concert recording, live events, that sort of thing, and then gradually got into mastering. Airshow, the shows on the air. That's where that comes from.
I was just about to ask you where the name came
from.
And
I never changed it. But in 1990 roughly was when I hung up my mastering shingle, and been pretty much only doing mastering since then.
Yeah. So when you switch to mastering, you kind of get to stay in one place a little bit more, I imagine.
Oh, the hours were a lot better than concert recording, where you're the first one in and the last one out. Now it got to the point where people would call up and say, let's master this record. Can we do it on Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday's good. Can we start at 4? I said, no, we could end at 4. We could start at 10.
Yeah. So Rockstars, it's this interview is happening at 10 a.m. my time, even earlier Dave's time. So I appreciated that. My first thought was he likes to get up with fresh ears and get things done in the morning, was my guess.
Oh yeah. Everybody has that window in time where they're best, I think. And I know that my brain is sharpest and my ears are sharpest in the morning. So I like to get an early start.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about the studio now. Where are you joining us from, and what is Airshow Mastering now today?
Yeah. Well, previous to where I am now, which I'll describe in a sec, I had a much larger facility in Boulder, down in town. We had 3 mastering rooms, a couple production rooms, about a half dozen people working there. In 2016, for various reasons, decided to slim down, and we shut that studio down. I built a building on my property, which is in the foothills west of Boulder, and built a single room facility. So there's the control room. Where I'm sitting now is a little production area and office, and it's like a boat. It's everything has its place, and you have to it's not super big. The control room is a nice, comfortable size, but it's not a huge facility, and I really enjoy that.
At iZotope, mixing just got even smarter. Introducing the new iZotope Catalyst series, Plasma, Aurora, and Cascadia, designed to transform your sound with intelligent processing for dynamically precise saturation, reverb, and delay. Plus, Neutron now features 3 new modules and an upgraded AI-powered mix assistant to help you get killer mixes with ease. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off the Catalyst series, Neutron, RX, or any of iZotope's incredible plugins at iZotope.com. Let me see if is this the studio now, or let me see here. I can do a screen share and
that's
tell me if you see that as well.
That's the studio. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that looks gorgeous. So what do you want to say about that? I mean, this is maybe an opportunity to just sort of describe what we're seeing in the picture. What are those giant tall speakers you use there?
The speakers are made by a company called Dunleavy Audio Labs. They're no longer around. They made big, very, very nice sounding audiophile speakers. And I've been using them for 27 years.
And to describe them for the rockstars listening now, just in audio only, so there's sort of like the large driver I don't know if you call it the woofer or not, is there's one on the bottom and one on the top, and they sort of mirror down to the tweeters in the middle, which looks like there may be ear height, so that the tweeters come to your ears, and everything else is above and below.
Yeah, the speaker configuration, that kind of configuration, is called a Diapolito speaker configuration, I believe. And there are two woofers, two lower mid, two upper mids, and then a tweeter. So it's a 4-way design. And the dual speakers, that's done to control the polar pattern of the loudspeaker. Those speakers are interesting in that the crossovers are all first order crossovers, very, very simple crossovers. So there's not a whole lot of phase shift going on. Studio was designed by Sam Burko, great acoustic designer and a very, very dear friend. And he did some measurements of the speakers, and he was totally impressed by the phase response of those Dunleavys. And I think that that's one of the factors that makes them so unfatiguing and easy to listen to for a long session.
Right on. And then I imagine the amps are probably a really important part of the equation too.
Yeah, I use an amp by this company called Air, AYRE, a local Boulder company. And
because AIR was taken already for your studio. Cool. And then what are some, so I see tape machines, I see racks of gear, I see a sitting area where you work and face the speakers, and then sort of off to your side is a computer screen and a bit of a computer station.
Yep.
Do you want to describe the workflow a little bit and like why things are positioned the way they are?
I don't like staring at a screen when I'm listening. And I'm usually not doing a lot of intensive editing and not staring at a lot of plugins. So I like to have the screen off to the side.
Here, I'll even turn this off so we don't have to stare at it the whole time.
Yep.
But so in other words, like sometimes when we're making a record, we might want a screen in front of us because we just have so much clicking to do and editing and everything while we're working. But in mastering, some of that stuff has already happened, and now you're just focused on listening. So the tools you need are on the racks right in front of you, right within hands reach. It's got to be a fun way to work, to be just. I was thinking about that in terms of let me see if I can pull it up. Some of the jazz records that you had in your discography too. So Rockstars, we have Dave's discography in the show notes. You can just click through and go listen to all these records, including a ton of these amazing sounding Grateful Dead records. So I was really enjoying doing that. So, but like on the jazz stuff, it made me think of, I was just thinking about the quality of mastering something like that. And when I listen to jazz music, I find I'm really just leaning into the listen. And so it made me wonder if when you're mastering it, it just puts you in a place where sometimes it's easy to decide what to do just because you hear it and it presents itself to you through listening to these great performances and improvisations and stuff.
Well, that's kind of the situation with everything. You know, the music kind of tells you what it needs, what it doesn't need, what direction it should go. In the case of jazz, and also a lot of the acoustic stuff that I enjoy doing, the idea there is to present a really wonderful sounding dynamic record.
Yeah.
So you don't have to squash the hell out of it. You don't have to You don't have to hype the EQ. You want to make it sound good. That's a generalization because jazz is is such a wide field.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in general, that's the deal.
Well, while I'm on that topic, let me ask this question. There's one of the albums in your discography, Jeff Hamilton, Bucket of Fat. It's got this beautiful jazz upright bass in the beginning. And I guess my question is, how do you address sort of the low end and the bloom of that low end to feel right to you in the bass tone? Is that a first place you might go? What are things we might want to understand about what happens in the mastering process when you're dialing in a sound like that?
I can't really say, and I don't think anybody could really say, well, first I do this and then I do that. And it's a holistic thing.
Are there times where you're using shelf EQs and low or high pass filters and things like that to sculpt the low end? Are there times where you have to get in with a sort of a surgical cut or boost in the low end for stuff like that, or is it?
Yeah, generally not a filter. Not a low cut filter.
Okay.
I think that's low cut filter is useful when there's unwanted sound down there, but if you low cut something, even if you're not low cutting where the music is, you could sense that phase shift that you're introducing. You could sense the that you're losing some of that subliminal low frequency energy that that helps lift the whole song. EQ works hand in hand with compression. Sometimes a compressor will sort of do something that you would do with EQ, so you have to work those together. So if I am going to use compression on a jazz record, then it's a combination of EQ and compression, and maybe just pulling out a little bit of the muddiness or whatever to let the to unmask what you really want to hear.
Yeah. I've noticed compression will bring certain frequencies forward.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're more or less aware of a particular one.
Yeah, and of course different compressors work differently. So
do that differently.
What I usually do with every project is I'll spend a lot of time on the first track, trying out various pieces of gear. As you can see in the picture, I have too much gear.
I think we can relate.
Yeah.
Even if we don't have it, we want that much gear. We want too much gear.
Yes and no. I mean, I know that the great Doug Sax famously used one equalizer and one limiter, and that was his signal chain for a lot of the work that he did. He didn't choose between 5 or 6 different EQs. But having said that, I'll play around with different things, different compressors, different equalizers to see what combination works, and then spend time unplugging the things that I don't want until I'm left with just what's needed.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say wanting that much stuff was necessarily a good thing. Well, so and that sort of also brings us forward to, in the world of digital, we have the ability to have a lot more of what we think we might want.
Yeah.
So what about for you, like as you've been in mastering for a while and you've seen the tools change over time, what about mastering has really sort of changed for you? I don't know, in the past 10 years or whatever you think is a relevant sort of recentish window
Yeah.
versus what things really remain the same over time. I mean, one thing I can say just looking at your picture is, you know, your ears and the speakers and what's coming out of them, that seems to remain a priority.
Oh, yeah. I think the goal is the same. You know, that hasn't changed. There have been a couple really interesting developments that have happened in the past 10, 15 years. Plangent Processes is one of them. And I don't know if you're familiar with...
No, I don't know anything
that.
about that.
Oh, okay.
Sounds like something for the garden.
If you know about analog tape recording, you know that in order to make it work and sound as great as it does, the audio that you feed into the tape machine is combined with a pretty high level, very, very high frequency tone. That's the bias signal. And what
that makes it stick to the tape.
It linearizes the tape. Without the bias, the frequency response and the distortion and the noise would make it unworkable. With bias, it's glorious. Turns out that bias signal, which can be anywhere from like 90 kilohertz all the way up to 450 kilohertz, depending on the tape machine, that's recoverable in a lot of cases with the right playback head and the right electronics and some analysis.
Oh, meaning we can actually play back the bias so that we capture it into the digital?
Yeah. And Plangent Process is started by this guy named Jamie Howarth in Massachusetts.
Can I rewind just to clarify for the Rockstars? So bias, this super high frequency, I like to think about it like it's this, it sort of wakes up the tape. This is totally non-scientific. It wakes up the tape so that the frequencies you want to hear stick to the tape and then play back. And then Rockstars, typically the bias is thought of as so high above human hearing that you just don't hear it when you play back the sound. So who cares? It's not a problem. It's not in the way.
You don't hear it. You don't care about it. It's disposable. It was never designed to do anything except what it does, which is to make the tape recording possible.
And just to say something else, so the record head, therefore, is capable of recording that high frequency bias onto the tape.
Yep. And
was the playhead also always bringing the bias back off the tape and trying to send it to whatever we were doing at that point?
No, it turns out it's easier to record a signal than to play it back. So all the advances are in tape playback to get more and more and more off the tape that's already there. But getting back to the bias, what Plangent does is they use that bias signal, which is a very, very stable signal. Jamie uses that to correct the speed variations in the tape, the wow and flutter, the scrape flutter, any gross speed inaccuracies. And the result is that the stereo image snaps into place a lot better. Distortions that were mechanically induced by the rollers and the guides in the tape machine, that's eliminated. So it's a very, very cool process. We use that for all the Grateful Dead releases. I remember sending some files that I transferred to Jamie of who the hell was it? It was a Doc Watson recording, and I thought that the recording was terrible. It was very harsh sounding, not terrible, but not great. It was a very harsh sounding recording, and the processed files came back from Jamie, and it sounded great. All that distortion was gone, and when he explained to me what was going on, I said, "Aha, that's really cool." So yeah, Plangent.
Yeah, it's cool to hear your explanation too, because I wasn't aware of all that. But I mean, it does make me wonder. So, for example, Box of Rain, one of the comments I had written down was that listening to your master of it, it just sounds three-dimensional coming out of my speakers.
Mm-hmm.
I hear this incredible tiny detail in the cymbals and the guitar strings. And I actually said, did it come from a new tape transfer? And it sounds like that's part of the answer. Is that related to the Plangent process as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
And of course, it's a great recording. To begin with, the guy who recorded and produced it, Steve Barncar, just did an amazing job on that record.
Yeah. Yeah. American Beauty and Working Man's Dead were always sort of like the gold standard of Grateful Dead recordings in my memory. I don't know whether that's really true or not, but somehow those ones always really stuck with me.
That's true for me as well. I got to tell you a story. We remastered all the Grateful Dead studio albums, and it was a fairly quick job. In 2013 for HD Tracks. Rhino and HD Tracks wanted to get these records up there, and so we remastered all 13 of the studio albums, used Plangent on them, and you have to work from the original tape. So I was working from the original master tapes. I put Working Man's Dead up on the tape machine. I press play, and Uncle John's Band comes out of the speakers, and I cried. It was
That's awesome.
Just so emotional for me.
It's such a great record, and it really sounds so beautiful listening to your remaster of it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I almost, there's sometimes when I'm getting ready for these interviews, it's a little bit of work. I'm organizing myself and making sure I've got all my stuff in place. But sometimes I just want to blow all that off and just sit back and just listen to all the music for hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I was definitely feeling that at the time. Are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing, working with professional-grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Dave Glasser, joining us from Airshow Mastering. And Dave, probably one of the few people I can actually ask this question of, are you ready to jam?
Have you got 6 hours?
Oh yeah, dude, we do, man. We bring you on for at least 2 anyway, right?
Yeah.
So let's jump in and talk more about Grateful Dead stuff, because I really love that, and I'm sure our listeners have patiently waited for me to get to the point there. What is it that you're working on now? You've got some ongoing Grateful Dead projects. You had also mentioned new pieces of gear in the studio that you might want to mention.
Yeah. Let's see. I guess I could mention it. Hasn't been announced, but it's inevitable. I've been doing the 50th anniversary releases of all the Grateful Dead studio albums. So 2025 is going to be Blues for Allah.
That's great.
So working on that and working on another big project that I really can't talk about. I don't know when they're going to announce that. It has me very, very busy, which is great.
And we also, by the way, once again, appreciate you taking out time for this to join us.
Oh, it's fun.
In the midst of all that. So does that mean that, so for example, did you remaster American Beauty in 2020? Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that the 50th began with a project like that, or that you will master it yet one more time as part of a 50th?
Well,
I'm trying to understand what that means.
Well, 2020 was the 50th anniversary of.
Oh, got it. Okay, thank you.
Of the album. Yeah.
And was that the first? Oh, I see. So you're doing each as the 50th shows up for each album.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's
yeah.
when
Yeah.
you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got it. Okay, sorry. I need to ask the really rudimentary questions here. What other things do you remember about doing American Beauty? So it's amazing to hear what you just said about. Oh, it was Working Man's Dead that sort of made you cry when you heard that sound. What about American Beauty? Tell us some stories you remember from doing that one.
Let's see.
How did that make you feel?
Oh gosh, that's such a wonderful record. 10 songs, and they're all keepers. I mean, there's not one weak song on there. And American Beauty and Working Man's, they're primarily song albums, right? They're not jam records. Although those songs have become vehicles for jamming, but it's about the song.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I guess that's absolutely true, and maybe that's part of what connected with me with those two albums also.
At that time, 1970, when both those records came out, the band was huge. The band, capital B, and you could hear the influence of that on the Dead back in 1970.
Right. So for clarity, Rockstars, the band was Bob Dylan's band becoming their own band.
Yeah.
Band.
Yeah, the only band that doesn't need a name, right?
The only band that doesn't need a name. Yeah, exactly. That's great. So let's see. I've also got some great questions. I reached out to some of my friends and previous guests on the show and thought, let me just see what other people want to know also about the Grateful Dead work that you've done. And I got some killer questions in. So let me jump to a question that came in from Joe Arman. He generously provided a few. First one, I'll jump around a little bit, but were the surviving band members involved in the process with you? And if yes, who was the most involved regarding feedback, re the mastering? Did they give any specific directions?
Yeah, good question. For the most part, they're not involved. That's all handled by David Lemieux, who's the archive manager for the band. I know I remember hearing that some of them were excited about listening to the Europe 72, the big box set, when that came out in 2011, I think. But yeah, they don't really have anything to do with it. I'm sure we'd hear about it if there was something that they didn't like.
Right.
But I did remaster Bob Weir's Ace album, and that was remixed. It was remixed by Derek Featherstone, who is the Dead and Company's live sound guy and owner of Ultrasound. And I know Bob was involved in that and had to approve it. And same with a thing that we just did for Dead and Company. I think Bob Weir and John Mayer had to approve it as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll jump back to one of my questions. So when it comes to the two records, American Beauty and Working Man's Dead, what can you tell us about the recording of those records too? Were the Grateful Dead making all their records in different studios with different producers at different times?
Let's see. American Beauty was recorded at Wally Heider's in San Francisco, and Steve Barncard was the producer and the engineer. That was one of the popular studios in San Francisco at the time, and at the same time that the Dead were making American Beauty, David Crosby was recording If I Can Only Remember My Name. So there's lots of cross-pollination of the various bands and whatnot.
Do you know anything about the kind of what the studio was made up of? Was there like a special console or tape machines that they were using or anything like that are worth mentioning?
Boy,
if that's too granular, that's fine. You can say so.
Yeah, I should know what the 2-track machine was because we had to know that when we did the Plangent.
Yeah.
And it was either a 3M or an Ampex 440. Other than that,
what might have been the popular tape format back then? Do you know?
Oh, well, it was recorded 16-track 2-inch and mixed to 1/4-inch 15 IPS stereo.
16-track 2-inch and 15 EPs. Yeah, I always loved 16-inch 2-track.
Yeah, oh yeah.
What about the tape maker formula? Was there a common one that everybody was using at that time, or were people sort of trying this or that or the other thing? Because like now, for example, just part of the reason I ask is today we pull up a plugin and it gives us all these different tape formats, and you're like, whoa, what are they? What do they mean? Were they used at different times for different genres of music?
Well, back then, 1970, that would have been acetate tape. So, Scotch.
So I'm familiar with more modern stuff like 499 and 256.
This is well before the era of the back-coated high output tapes like that. Those tapes, tape formulations sound great.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. I forget the tape formulation, but it was one of those acetate.
Yeah, I feel like there's a 200 number I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, 201 maybe 202.
Yeah, Rockstars, drop a comment in too if you're listening to this and you want to put that in the comments. That'd be great. And then when you have older tape formats like that, old acetates, they can come apart over time, right? In storage and archiving, or not necessarily?
Well, what often happens is the splices dry out, so you have to redo all the splices.
Oh, wow.
Do
you actually have to cut the tape, or is it more like getting the tape off there and just putting the splice back together?
No, you just have to peel off the piece of splicing tape that pulled apart and just put a new piece in.
You never straighten it out? You never think, you know what, man, that kick drum never really sounded like it was on the downbeat for me anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and tighten that up a little bit.
No, that's above my pay grade.
Okay, cool. So let's stay on that for a sec. So were you doing some of those tape transfers, or was it the who was it that you mentioned?
Plangent.
With?
For the 50th anniversary editions of Working Man's and American Beauty, fortuitously, Jamie Howarth of Plangent and the guy who he works with, John Chester, who has a long history in live sound in New York. He was the chief engineer at the Fillmore East. He, I think he did comms at Woodstock. Anyway, they were traveling back to the East Coast from somewhere, from California. And so they stopped in Boulder, and we did the transfers together. And it was great having Jamie and John there, because they know tape machines and tape inside out. And one of the things that we've been doing recently is, I should back up.
Sure.
The bias signal that we're trying to retrieve from these tapes to do this Plangent Process thing, that's at a very high frequency. So you can extract the bias and record that on a separate track, or you could do your transfer at a high enough sample rate that you can recover the bias directly from the transfer. So we've been using a sample rate of 384 to do those transfers, and then any bias up to half of that, up to the Nyquist frequency, you can get directly from the file.
Yeah. So again, just to reiterate, Rockstars, tape machines are remarkable things, and it's really quite amazing that they work at all, let alone work so well.
Yeah.
But they're mechanical machines, and so you have to ask yourself the question when you think about that. Yeah, how does a machine record something at a consistent speed and then play it back at a consistent speed? And all the variations in machines give you these things that Dave was talking about, like wow and flutter, and there's probably other words for that. And then you also have the mechanics of really important things like alignment of the tape across the tape heads. I remember taking an album down to remix it with the band I was working with. We had recorded it in one studio and taken it to another. And then we discovered that the azimuth of the tape heads were all off.
Yep.
And we tried to align it. And I learned, this is sort of a funny throwback to the ADAT world, but we were in an ADAT / 2-inch 16-track studio. So when I printed tones on the machine, I could only print 8 at a time through our Mackie mixer console. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just print the first 8 tones on there, and then I'll rewind the track and print the second 8 tones on there, which would make sense if all you were trying to do was set the volume or level frequency of those frequencies. But when I tried to use those same tones to align the azimuth of the tape head for playback, which is the angle at which the tape head is leaning one way or the other, how straight is it? You reference a track on one edge and the other edge of that tape head, which means that the phase of the tones I had printed on there were completely out of phase from each other. So it's making it impossible for me to get it right. Anyway, sorry to pivot there, but just reminded me of it. And so therefore this stuff that Dave's talking about with the plangent frequency and recovering or process and recovering the bias frequency means that way up high, that what is it, like 100 kilohertz? Or
it depends on the tape. Excuse me. It depends on the tape machine. Some are as low as 90 kilohertz, all the way up to some Studers are like 240 kilohertz. The Ampex ATR is 450 kilohertz. That's impossible to retrieve, but different tape machines use different frequencies.
Right. So some of these tape machines, as they advance themselves right out of recovery by getting the bias so high.
Well, it turns out there's some tricks you could do to do plangent.
Play it back at a lower speed?
You could do that, yeah.
So, Rockstars, at the risk of beating this too long into the ground, by recovering the bias frequency and the transfer back to digital, it means now you have this benchmark that you can measure against. And so therefore the software can now make sure that benchmark bias frequency is rock solid.
Exactly.
And thereby, in relation, all the audio that was recorded on there is going to be a perfect representation of what happened in that moment. So do you ever find that straightening out the sound of stuff like that loses something as opposed to recovering it? And I don't mean technically, but I mean musically and artistically.
No, because what you're doing is eliminating all the deleterious effects of the tape, like wow and flutter. Mm-hmm. But you're not changing the intrinsic characteristic of the quote unquote tape sound.
Yeah.
But you're peeling away that layers. So in a way, you're keeping all the tape goodness, if you will, and eliminating the bad stuff that you don't want. You're almost listening to the output of the console rather than the output of the tape machine.
Right. And so another fair comparison or descriptive is to remind us that when a band would have been recording in the studio at that time, you're going through a console to the tape machine, you're listening to everything, hitting the speakers and hitting the headphones through the console, and the tape machine during the recording process would, especially if a band's performing at the same time, is an input, which means you're actually, the band is hearing the sounds without any of these kind of tape fluctuations in there yet. So to find a way to recreate that in the final master is really more of a representation of what the band heard when they performed.
That's a good way to put it.
Intended.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's another question from Joe. Joe said, what were some of the more challenging Grateful Dead LPs to remaster and why?
We're talking about the studio LPs, not the live stuff.
Yeah, well, he didn't say. So you can answer on that, whatever comes to mind first. And let me expand that question, because he did say, his next question says, there are a few albums, which maybe were studio ones, that were somewhat muddy sounding when they first came out. Anthem of the Sun, Blues for Allah, and especially Wake of the Flood, recorded in the same Sausalito, California studio as Fleetwood Mac's Rumors.
Right.
How did he approach remastering those? Good question, Joe.
Yeah, Wake of the Flood, that's a good description of how that master sounds. Plangent definitely clears some of that up. Remember on that one and on most of them, just EQ, no compression, tiny bit of limiting maybe to catch some of the random peaks. But I think the 50th anniversary release of Wake of the Flood turned out very nice. I think that combination of Plangent and some minor EQ to get rid of some of that muddiness opened things up nicely.
Yeah. Rock your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring Contact 8 and expanded hardware integration. Whether you're crafting cinematic scores, EDM bangers, or experimental soundscapes, Complete 15 gives you industry-leading synths, sampled instruments, and creative effects to bring your ideas to life. Contact 8 introduces powerful new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth textures in real time. And with Machine 3 now available, you'll enjoy even tighter integration with Machine Plus and the latest NKS-supported hardware from brands like Akai, Korg, and Novation. Plus, Complete 15 features revamped Massive X, Guitar Rig 7 Pro, and Isotope 11, helping you shape, mix, and master with ease. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com.
But let me expand that. Talk about some of the live Grateful Dead stuff. They recorded all their concerts, and that goes back to Owsley, who was the great LSD chemist and the band's benefactor, and helped design the Wall of Sound. But he started out recording all their concerts so the band could listen to the tapes and learn from the tapes. That carried on throughout their career, and throughout they used a variety of recording formats and recording methods. Everything from a nice Nagra to cassettes to Sony F1s to DATs to different to other different reel-to-reel machines, and all of those present various challenges. And some of the recordings, those live recordings, are board feeds. So you're hearing, what the mixer, front of house mixer was mixing. Others are board feeds combined with some audience mics.
I don't remember which one it was that I noticed that on, but there was one record or one of the recordings in your discography, and I felt like Jerry's voice was really I think it was panned left a little bit and very forward in the mix. And could it be possible that some of the stuff we would hear is that what you just described, a board mix where the balances are not what you would typically expect?
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of is what it is. That's the document of what happened. You make it sound as good as you can. You try and solve as many of the problems as you can, but you can't remix it. So
okay, let me jump forward to a question here. This is another one that let me see here. This one comes in from Megan Gohill. His first comment was just, I heard a few of the remasters and they sound amazing. I agree with you on that one. He says, this is a similar question to Joe's. I'd love to know how much direction he got from the band while doing remasters. So I think you answered that. He said the band always embraced technology from the wall of sound to instruments like their alembic guitar wiring and in-ear monitors. How did they embrace the idea of remastering? So was there ever a part where the band sort of had a lot to say about a remastering process in any of these records?
Boy, not that I know of.
And is remastering the Grateful Dead, are you the first one to be doing that, or did you pick up where somebody else
I was surprised finding out not too long ago, for instance, how many reissues of American Beauty there were. It's a huge list.
Yeah.
Some of those releases may be the same, but nonetheless, it's been revisited multiple times. So
it's such a great record.
Yeah.
And it's also, as an artist, it makes a lot of sense to be able to keep re-releasing something if you can.
Well, that's good for the artist, good for the record label. I mean, the record label, a label like Rhino, which specializes in reissues, that's their mandate. They have to monetize the catalogs that they have.
Aren't they a New England label?
No.
Or do I have that wrong?
Yeah, I don't know what that would be. Rhino is now part of Warner in LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the part of the follow-up question from Megan was, and what was the fan reaction? So what do you want to say about remasters and reactions and feedback that you're aware of from fans, maybe towards the band or maybe that you've received yourself? I mean, consider my comment that this stuff sounds freaking great, Dave. Consider that one of the fan reactions right there.
I don't pay that much attention. I have read negative reviews of some of the reissues, but a lot of positive reviews. And I know it wouldn't have left here and it wouldn't have passed muster with David Lemieux if if it wasn't better than what came before. So that's that's the goal.
Yeah. So Megan sort of followed that up with the fan base is very musically aware, and there's some fans that are very resistant to change. On the other hand, we need to adopt the new mediums, i.e. streaming, et cetera. So that makes sense. And then that comment reminds me of a question I had for you, which is, when you go into remastering stuff and redoing these records, I guess the intent is always to see if you can, artistically glean something new from the original.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is, how does modern loudness and streaming play into a remaster process like the Grateful Dead?
It kind of doesn't. That's pretty much my call, and I don't squash things. That just wouldn't work. So there's for these records and other reissues that I've worked on too. There's not a call to make it loud.
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind for me is, if I'm listening to a Grateful Dead record that's been remastered, there's a fair chance that I already know that record and I'm excited about it. So I'm already reaching for the volume knob to turn it up anyway. I don't need anybody to help me out so that it catches my attention against, a commercial or something like that.
Well, it's a historical document, and you don't want to screw with that.
Yeah. All right. So another question I have for you is, we talked about the Plangent process. And so that immediately answers part of this question about how digital tools become part of mixing with an analog process to bring out something really new. What about plugins and other parts of the, plugins that are either emulating analog tools, which is sort of a typical version of a plugin, recreations of things, versus plugins that do something new in the areas of EQ and I guess phase and compression and limiting and all that stuff? Is it hard to select plugins that you approve of for mastering?
I have a limited number of things that I use, not because I don't like plugins, just because I kind of have what I need. But there's one thing, it's not a plugin per se, but I'm really sold on MQA.
And you were saying Tidal delivered that for a while, right?
Tidal used to do that. They don't anymore. MQA, the company, was bought.
What is it? What is MQA?
MQA is, like Plangent, it's a technology for addressing the time domain issues. Because we've already pretty much addressed the frequency domain and ways of eliminating noise and distortion and things, but nobody's really done much in the time domain. And of course, that's what Plangent's doing to stabilize the time base, of tape playback. That's what MQA is doing by applying some really sophisticated filtering to which pretty effectively eliminates the effect of the A to D and D to A process. So you're not dealing with the phase distortions that we all live with with digital recording.
Right. So
and hopefully MQA has said that there's going to be another streaming service that uses MQA sometime in the future.
So MQA is something that needs to happen at the streaming stage as opposed to in the mastering stage?
It could be either. I think it's best if you could set those parameters in mastering and then have it encoded using those parameters for streaming. But it doesn't have to be. It could just be applied by the streaming services. Not ideal, but it works well. And then on the playback side, you need a DAC that will decode the MQA.
Right. So at the risk of misinterpreting this, when we do the A to D process, analog to digital, and then D to A, the digital back to analog, we do things like introduce Nyquist filters to filter out top end so that it imprints itself properly onto the digital bits, and we don't get aliasing. And then when we go D to A, I actually am not aware whether there's any kind of reverse EQ, but it sounds like maybe the MQA is. And so to preface that, when we put filters on things, we affect the timing of frequencies against each other in the same way that you said your speakers are designed really carefully to deliver the lows, the low mids, the upper mids, and the tweeter in time to your ear, right?
Yep, it is.
So it's important to keep all those things together. And the MQA stuff also sounds similar to me to what you learn about how you get on and off tape. So in other words, to get frequencies onto tape, we use record EQ, and we print it on, and maybe there's boosts of high end to imprint the high frequencies onto the tape, and then those have to get re-EQ'd to be flattened out again coming off the tape. So there's probably challenges there as well. So that's fascinating. So MQA is addressing some of those phasing issues that occur between the capture and the playback of audio so that it brings it back into its original phase?
Yeah.
Right on. I did all right for my first guess there, didn't I? Okay, cool. Well, let me see here. Speaking of phase, another question I had for you, doing that rag has a cool effect on the vocal that is like this wide, wild, out of phase stereo thing. And it reminds me, as we mix and we learn about things like, check your mix in mono, which some people feel like that's, do it. Some people are like, who cares? It just made me think, are there situations where you are presented with sounds that are out of phase wide? So in stereo, they sound loud and cool, but if they go to mono, they sort of disappear or they get lower in the mix because of summing the left and the right together. And do you address those? Do you sometimes make a decision where you can make it less quiet in the mono if you want to?
You can. I mean, it's a conversation. I talk to the client about that and
right.
say, well, do you realize that cool guitar break kind of disappears in mono because of the effect that you have on there? And sometimes they'll say, yeah, that's cool. That's what we want. Others will say, oh, I didn't know that. And then you figure out what to do. Maybe they remix it, or there's not. Is
there stuff that you can do in mastering if you want?
There's not a whole lot you could do that it might fix that, but it'll screw something else up. Yeah.
So really, a part of mastering is communication and giving people an option to go back and make a change if they want to.
That's the main thing. That's where it starts is communication. Obviously there are some producers and engineers who don't want to hear that. Here's the mix. This is this is the mix we want. Make it sound just like this, but better. And others who you could have that conversation with. So you have to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music. Check out the new iZotope Catalyst series featuring Plasma, Aurora, and Cascadia. Powerful tools designed to supercharge your mixes with intelligent processing. These innovative plugins give you dynamic control over saturation, reverb, and delay, effortlessly enhancing excitement and clarity. And now Neutron introduces new modules like Clipper, Density, and Phase, completing your flexible, fully equipped mixing suite. Plus, the new AI-powered Mix Assistant helps you create a custom signal chain for your audio, referencing professional instrument profiles or your own examples, with easy macro controls to dial in a perfect mix. Use the coupon code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma, Ozone, Neutron, RX, or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Well, let me see here. I got another question too about about some of these amazing tones on there. So, for example, Phil Lesh's bass sound, it's such a striking bass tone, particularly on tunes, China Cat, Sunflower, Friend of the Devil. What comments would you like to make on why that bass stands out so much? Is there stuff that comes all the way to you in mastering where you're making decisions about the bass and making sure that it translates that way?
Boy, I think in those cases, that's the instrument, but it's mostly Phil. The way that he plays. I wouldn't take credit for any of that other than to make sure that it's presented, like it should be.
Do you have anything you can share with us about how he played or what he recorded through or what his bass was or any of that stuff?
I know you could find that stuff online. I know that he started using custom alembic basses, like
I think that was in
the Wall of Sound era. It was a modified Guild Starfire with all these custom electronics.
Yeah, it's a great tone.
Yeah,
do you know if he played with a pick or with fingers? You ever hear about
pick?
That? It was a pick. Okay, yeah. I think I love that sort of gentle attack on the notes like that. Such a great sound. And then of course there was the Wall of Sound area, I think, our era where, if I don't know, maybe that was the whole time, where the individual strings would go to different speaker arrays, right?
Yeah, I think that was part of the design. I think Rick Turner designed the bass specifically for that Wall of Sound PA.
That's got to be a lot of fun to get into that level of curiosity about the electronics and the sound and creating something like that, which I guess for those guys probably really comes about through, the extensive live shows and just the ability to keep iterating and trying new things.
Yeah, I think that curiosity, that's the key. Being curious about how these things work, and boy, what if we did this? And
yeah.
What
sort of level of that kind of curiosity translates for you into the mastering? I mean, is it just all the stuff we've talked about, like how to capture these tapes into the digital world in new ways? Are there other areas where you find yourself being very curious? I mean, you've got those beautiful speakers in your studio. How often are you checking out new speakers and, adventuring in that world?
New speakers, that's not on my radar. If I ever go to an Atmos rig, then I'll have to deal with that. But no, that's a constant.
What would cause you to go to an Atmos rig?
Mostly,
or what might?
Mostly curiosity, and I kind of like to do it, but I don't want to go into horrendous debt to do it.
Don't go into horrendous anything. Horrendous just doesn't sound like a good place.
Good advice, yeah. But I've always been curious about new things. We were one of the first places to work with SACDs in the around 2000 or so. I mean, that came about because the Sony SACD Center was in Boulder, right next door to where the studio was. But I was curious about that. We got into that. I still have my Sony Sonoma system that I get to fire up once a year or so.
Do you know, I think is it Robert at the Library of Congress?
Oh, Robert Friedrich, yeah.
Yeah, I saw him do a presentation here at AES about the history of Telarc records, and it was I was blown away by that whole story and the sound of those early recordings. He played us a recording of Firebird that was done in '77 to digital, and it sounded amazing.
I was probably done to the what was the system?
I forgot because he switched different systems as he played back different eras. But it was like maybe one of the 1-bits or an early Sony or something like that.
No, it was before. It was before that. It'll come to me, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot for
no.
Hey, can you remember what happened 50 years ago?
One of the digital pioneers, had this digital recording system, and Telarc was an early adapter of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you think that we're getting better and better at the sound of digital over the decades? Do you think that we are struggling to hold on to what we already know in the sound of digital?
Oh, I think things are definitely improving. Yeah. By the time this comes out, it'll be out in the open. But John LeGroux from Millennia.
You're right, Millennia, who mic preamps.
Yeah. He started another company, and they have a DAC that is just astounding, and I've been using it for a couple months. I think they're going to officially release it in January, and it's a major advance in that technology.
Who would be likely to use that at first? Is this sort of an audiophile playback situation? Is it a mastering playback into the analog situation, or is it the kind of thing that might show up in everybody's playback experience?
I would guess that at first it would be mastering guys and gals and audiophiles. And then, if something is real good, you want it widely dispersed. So
we did talk about wanting more stuff in our studio earlier, so that holds true.
That's one of the few new things that I've gotten recently.
All right, very exciting, very exciting. Okay, cool. So let me jump back. I'll pivot back to another question from Joe Arman. Joe asks, does Dave have an opinion in the debate over which of the two mixes were superior for Anthem of the Sun? And you're going to have to set us straight on the pronunciation.
Aoxomoxoa?
Aoxomoxoa. The original mixes or the 1971 remixes? Getting granular.
Yeah, really. For Anthem, I like the original mix. When was it? 68? I like the 68 mix. The 71 seems to have smoothed out some of the weirdness in it. For Aoxomoxoa, there's stuff that I like about both. And for both those records, when we did the 50th anniversary editions, there was room on one CD to put both versions. So on the 50th anniversary releases, there's both versions of the of those records.
Both remastered.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but that'll be a chance for us to just listen and decide what we think.
Yeah.
And we can't blame it on the mastering this time because they're both remastered and they both sound great. I mean, I didn't mean that. That probably came out sounding wrong. What I mean is, if there's a difference between the two, you won't have to wonder.
That's a mixed difference. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It'll be a mixed difference.
Yeah.
That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Back up and think before you speak, Lij. Okay, cool. What in your recollection are some of the last, years that any of the Grateful Dead stuff was actually remixed as opposed to remastered? And maybe that's not really a fair question because there's been recordings up to, recently, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But was 71 sort of like the beginning of a remixing process for the Grateful Dead, or was that sort of the end of a remixing process?
I see. Yeah, I don't think any of the other studio albums got a remix like Oxo and Anthem did.
Okay. And just for clarity, Rockstars, this is probably obvious to all of us, but just in case it's not, when we say remixing, it's like going back to the multi-tracks, pulling up the multi-track tape and remixing it, whether it's mixed on a console or in a, 71 would have been on a console, or today in a computer. Mm-hmm. And remastering it, of course, is taking the mix itself and recapturing it and doing the mastering.
I should correct myself. Ace by Bob Weir, which came out in 72. In 2022, that was remixed.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was the one you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it was.
Looking at my notes. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that'd be a good example for us to check out too, as far as like a really, like a big leap in time and a remix.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How we feel about it. I mean, when it comes to stuff like that, I mean, the last word is kind of always like, well, what do we think? Because as a listener, you just listen, and if you like something or don't like it, that's kind of all you got in the end,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you approach remastering? This is from Joe too. The notorious live album "Steal Your Face." I don't know why it's notorious, but
that was from recordings made at Winterland in 74. It was the same stuff that was used, same recordings that were used in the Grateful Dead movie. Different songs, but same shows. And the story that I heard was that they, it was mixed by Phil Lesh and Owsley, I believe. And they went a little nuts with what were then brand new Eventide digital delays. So it's a very ambient kind of a feel. That was challenging, is all that I could say. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so I feel like it's worth mentioning. Notorious is one of those funny words where sometimes people use it this way and that way, but if you look it up, notorious means it's famous usually for a negative reason.
Yes.
Sometimes people use it thinking it's a positive.
I've always liked that record though. So,
are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, These mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. All right, so then a follow-up question to that is, do you enjoy mastering the live stuff or the studio stuff more?
Both. Yeah.
It sounds like a fascinating part of the process is literally the real engineer part of it, which is like, how are we going to get this off of the medium and into our mastering studio in a way that really ports over the original intent of the music, so that you can then start doing whatever you're going to do to it. And what are some of the things that would be typical in the process once you've got it into the digital? Are you using tools like Isotope RX? Is that like a common one that is part of the process?
When needed, yeah.
Are there other ones that are similar to that become part of, restoration before it's artistic EQ, I guess?
I'm a real dinosaur. For stereo work, I still use Sonic Studio Soundblade. Which,
oh wow, okay,
yeah, and that's kind of an obsolete program, but it does stuff that no other workstation does, and I've tried a bunch of them, and I just can't wrap my head around the others. But Soundblade has some great restoration tools built in. You could work directly on the file, and you don't have to render it.
Okay,
but you could still undo it later if you want to. I don't know if any other system really does that, but between those tools in Soundblade and RX, I mean, that gives you pretty much all that you want for digital restoration.
So that's the restoration part. And does your process begin with that and then go from there as a file into another app that lets you apply EQs and compressors if you want to, or limiters or any of that sort of thing?
Most of the time I'm going out of the computer and using analog gear and then back in. So there's really, if something is in rough shape, then you want to do some cleanup with RX or whatever before you dive into actually making it sound good. But usually they go hand in hand, and you work along, you find some dropouts, you fix those, you keep on working, you find some distortion, you fix that, you keep on working.
And then when you come back, so you go out of the computer, you go through all the analog tools, which you see, that's what's within hand's reach in between you and the speakers. And then it gets captured back into the computer. What would be a software that you would use to capture it back into the computer?
Same program.
Same program, Soundblade. And then if you were going to apply, do you ever use digital limiters and things like that?
Yeah, usually the final limiter is digital, because it just works better than an analog limiter.
All that happens within Soundblade, and it might, even if you use a plugin, it just
as a
shows
plugin,
up yeah. Okay, so a Soundblade is a DAW.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool.
Soundblade is what used to be Sonic Solutions.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the first ones I had to learn in school.
Yeah, it was
pretty
really
amazing.
ahead of its time for what it does.
Does it? It does. It's really handy for doing audio sync to film as well, right? Or no?
Not really. If I when I work on video stuff, then I work in Pro Tools.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So let me see. Here's another question from Joe. I see that he's mastered almost every original Dead record, studio and live, except for just a couple. Why did he not remaster Live Dead, considered by some to be their most successful live album, or Skull and Roses?
Skull and Roses was remastered.
By you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go. Cross that one off.
In 71. Live Dead, I don't know. That's not my decision.
Okay.
I don't know why they didn't do that.
Awesome. Well, let me see here. I'm going to jump forward to some of our closing questions here. Let me ask you this one. This is one I ask all of our guests on the show. I sometimes ask it. But when you started out in recording, was there anything that you felt like was holding you back? Just if you rewind back and you just think like, what was keeping you from moving forward initially?
I don't know. I didn't intern at a big studio like a lot of the folks of my era did. Mm-hmm. So I probably missed some stuff then. But I don't think anything really held me back. I've always thought that never say no. If somebody asks you to do something, say yes. I'll do that, unless it's totally out of your expertise or whatever. But take chances, and sometimes you'll fail miserably, and when you don't, then that's a stepping stone to the next thing.
Is it better to say yes and double the length of time it's going to take, like Scotty in Star Trek, so that when you deliver it in half the time, you look like a superhero?
Oh, yeah. And that applies to budgets, too.
Right.
You quote one thing and then bill less, and they'll say, oh, wow, this is great.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a hard one to practice, though. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
What do you remember as some of the best advice you received? Anybody who was like a mentor initially for you that gave you something that's really stuck with you?
Well, I don't know if there's anything specific, just generalities. When I was at NPR, I think a lot of my colleagues were, I learned a lot from my colleagues at that place. A guy named Neil Muncy, who did groundbreaking work on audio grounding stuff. There's a whole big fat AES journal of just his grounding things. He did some training work at NPR, and I learned a lot from him. Other folks that I tried to emulate, but actually what they did had nothing to do with what I'm doing. I was fortunate enough early on to do a lot of remotes and to do record concerts using both of the New York record plant trucks and all four of the LA record plant trucks and Sheffield truck and a bunch of other recording trucks, and stuff that like that Kuster McAllister, may he rest in peace, and Dave Hewitt did in their trucks just really, really struck me about how they organized all the subsystems and how things were wired, and whatever they wanted, they could turn around and plug it in, and it was there. And that's how I tried to design my mastering rooms, was to make them as flexible as possible, so that none of that mechanical stuff got in the way of the actual work.
Yeah, well, plus describing some of the processes and realizing you've got some pretty critical mechanical stuff to be paying attention to, like the tape transfers and things like that. You don't really want other things distracting you.
Yeah.
Did you work with Dave in the truck?
Yeah, on a couple of remotes. Yeah.
How hard was it to have two Daves in the same truck?
I've been in situations where there was 4 Daves, so that's fine.
4 days.
Yeah,
3 Jacks and a Jill.
You wouldn't have that problem, though.
That was a Spinal Tap quote there.
Oh, right.
Let me jump forward to this one. So this one is a question I like to ask all the guests, and it's hypothetical, and we get to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back and find young Dave and say, listen, dude, first of all, you can relax. You're still going to have this much hair on your head one day, so way to go. Second of all, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could? That was a compliment on your hair, Dave, by the way, if it didn't come off clearly.
Thank you. I need a haircut. Gee, I don't know.
That's a good bit of advice right there.
I would probably tell myself to take a deep breath more often and to think things through better than I think that I have.
Yeah.
And to look at the big picture and not get too hyper-focused.
Is hyper-focus a challenge just in the mastering process itself, just because there's so much detail work?
Well, you have to be focused, but you also have to have the big picture in mind.
Yeah.
So you need that field of view.
Is it easier to have a big picture on remastering a record that you're familiar with versus something that's never existed before in mastering?
Only to the extent that if it's an existing record and the goal is to just make a quote-unquote better version than it was, then that kind of limits, what your possibilities are, and
right.
So that makes it a little bit easier. Something that's new, depending on what the producer wants, it could be anything. It could be anything from, here's my mix and I love it. Don't really do anything you don't need to. Or it could be, here's this mix and we love it, but go nuts and let's see what can happen.
Yeah, and it occurs to me that when you're remastering something, it's a bit like beating another mix. You have a reference that you can check it against.
Yeah.
And when it's brand new, the only reference would just be, is this better than the mix, I guess.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, dude, thank you so much for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. What a blast to hang out with you. You actually, I think it was you, mastered a record that I produced years ago for a local artist, Daniel Lawrence Walker, because I remember before I knew anything about you and this whole history, he was like, yeah, I'm going out to Airshow Mastering to do this. It's going to be great.
I'd have to look that up. Did you
have other engineers too?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it might have been somebody at Airshow, but
yeah, but
what a pleasure to have you here, man. Thank you for joining us
so much. This is fun.
Let the rockstars know, where can they go find out more about you? Of course, we've got links in the show notes too. What if they are just ready to get an amazing master of their record and they just need, or they have questions?
Airshowmastering.com.
Awesome. That's easy, straight to the point.
Yeah.
I love it. I appreciate that you didn't try and remember 10 social media channels too, which sometimes happens. Dude, thank you for joining us, rockstars. Thanks for listening. As we like to say now on our YouTube channel, remember to kick that like button, but be nice to your computer and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more of these interviews with amazing guests like David joining us today. Dave, thanks for hanging with us, man. We really appreciate your time, dude.
Thank you.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible. iZotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, Stealth Chair, and SAE Institute Nashville. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes at iZotope.com, nativeinstruments.com, or stealthchair.com. Use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin or chair purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in the show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. And please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because it's a great way to help support this show. And leave us a comment below to let us know what you thought of this interview or who we should have on as a guest in the future. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for watching and listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.